Welcome to Chief Among Them podcast. My name is Vernon,
My name is Nathan.
My name is Drew.
and we are just fellow Christian men who want to dig into God's Word deeper and learn more about it. We get our name, Chief Among Them, from 1 Timothy 1 15 through 17. This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. However, for this reason I obtained mercy, and that me first, Christ Jesus, might show all long-suffering as a pattern to those who are going to believe on him for everlasting life. Now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible, to God who alone is wise, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen. And the reason we chose that is just to emphasize the point of Christ has come to save sinners, whom we are chief. Just to more emphasize the point that we have no qualifications for this. We are simply doing this because the only qualification we have is that we are sinners saved by grace. And so, yeah. First off,
But that's all you need to learn about God.
yeah.
Indeed.
All you need to know is be a sinner saved by. Well, you don't even need to be a sinner saved by grace to learn about God. You can learn about God
And then
but to learn the deeper things of God. Anyway,
And we know how to read.
yeah,
Barely.
just a little bit.
So,
So kind of this like housekeeping disclaimer type thing. I want to apologize for the background sound. I'm doing as best as I can with the editing to cut a lot of that out, and it has worked for a lot of it. But I do have dogs, and they are upstairs because otherwise they're down here barking at us the entire time. So the other thing too is with last week's episode. So basically, what happened was we set a plan to record 2 episodes in one day. We recorded the episode. We went to go save the episode and export it, and it took longer than we expected it to. And we weren't able to do we weren't able to record a second episode.
we are inexperienced young dudes.
Yes.
And it just did that again.
Well, that was not this one. That was the first time when the exporting took too long.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we went to record our next episode, and we made sure we added in time to do 2 episodes, and we did do 2 episodes. And the problem is, the first time we recorded, we hit we stopped recording and went to go save, and there was not enough storage. So we re-recorded after I thought I fixed the issue. Same thing happened again. So that's what happens with last week's episode. So this week, we started recording, and it happened again after 30 minutes. So I finally figured it out. It should not happen again. The main issue was the default storage. It was going to the computer's internal and not to the external I have. So right now the default is the external, and so we should not have that problem again. If we do, I'm quitting. But yeah, so
That 4 hour gone.
4 hour gone.
4 hour
Yeah,
day.
we recorded for 4 hours last week, and all of it gone. But it's
It
okay.
was a really good conversation, too.
It was a really
Luckily,
good
it'll be
conversation.
long enough that we can redo it without it feeling awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so today, like I said in the little apology video I made for you guys, we're going to be talking about the passion and the crucifixion of Christ. And by passion, I mean like the suffering he endured from the start in the garden until his death, until he was on the cross.
Yeah. Because, our reasoning is, I feel like as Christians, we tend to, get so... We tend to kind of flippantly say, oh, yeah, he died for us.
Yep.
Or, oh, yeah, he suffered and died. With giving that no meaning, no depth.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, the absolute torture and stuff entailed there, including taking all of God's wrath for our sin on him, is
Yep.
very...
Plus,
Obviously, the resurrection is, the more important part, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important so we don't forget that,
these are the consequences.
we remember yes, Christ died for us, and that's the important thing. But it's also important to remember exactly how he died for us. I think
to not take it for granted.
to not take it for granted. Yeah, I think a lot of Christians mainly do that.
Yeah.
Not saying all, but I think a lot, especially as Christians grow, we get focused in on the other things of Christ and kind of forget the basis of everything. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just the physical aspect of it too, but also the mental and spiritual and emotional toll that it had on him too is important to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're going to start off where you decided to choose. We chose Luke to read out of instead of jumping back and forth between the different Gospels. Luke is, I think, and we both agree, we think the most in depth with a lot of stuff. Yes.
I was just gonna mention. Sorry if I sound a little weird or start dying. I am overcoming a pestilence. So.
Yes, a pestilence.
Well, I have overcome it. It was just lingering in my throat.
It's fine. He's just only going to get us
What's that?
sick and die.
What's the plague doctor SCP? It's gonna show up and just stab him.
Yeah, it's just
start cutting Drew open in the middle.
If that happens, just keep going. I'll be fine. Yeah.
Sew you back up as a
Also,
zombie.
we know Easter was a week ago, but
Yeah. Well, what happened was we knew Easter was a week ago. We forgot Easter was a week ago. We knew Easter was coming. We forgot Easter was coming. And so, like, yeah, I showed up on Sunday to have palm branches. I'm like, oh, this is Holy Week. We should be recording an episode about the Passion. And we didn't have enough time to, like, change stuff up. So, which I think is a good thing because we never got to record that episode. So, yeah, so apologies all around. So yeah, we're going to start right away with jumping into the Garden of Gethsemane.
Doing New Living Translation. We should probably mention that.
Yeah, reading out a New Living Translation just because it's easier to have it read to you. I know that a lot of people, once we get to that point, when we're on Spotify, aren't going to have a Bible to access right in front of them.
We wanted to make this as accessible for people who are working with their hands as possible because I've listened to Bible podcasts and
I didn't start listening to podcasts until I started working somewhere where like my mind can be idle. So
yeah,
like I don't
it's one of those things
somewhere where my mind can be idle, so I don't listen to podcasts really. So that's probably why I suck at doing this.
No, it's because we're all new at this and are very uncomfortable in front of a camera and mic.
Dude,
honestly, I'm fine.
This is also
I'm definitely getting much more warmed up to the camera.
Especially like once you get into I actually had a conversation about someone because I asked if he would want to come on at any point. Like, if there's any topic, let me know, and we can talk about him coming on at some point. And he said the one thing is like being in front of the camera. And I'm like, once the conversation gets started and like you get going in the episode, you kind of forget they're there.
I ignore you exist. No, I just ignore that you all exist for a minute, and I'm fine.
Yeah. And we don't.
But then I do awkward things with my body, but that's another point.
And we don't only do the New Living Translation. Like Drew and I have King James version.
Yeah.
So this is the this is the Bible that my wife gifted me at my baptism. So
we plan to like you said. I was gonna say it was in the last episode, but we said it in every single episode that we've recorded. But we only have one previous episode. We plan on getting a numerous amount of different versions of the Bible, especially when we get to points where like we're unsure about a meaning of a verse and want to cross-reference.
It's good to have different translations.
Yeah. Right now we have
concordance.
We have NLT, KJV, and New KJV, and then a KJV concordance. Eventually, we want to get. There's an apologetics Bible. I think it's the Christian Standard.
Yeah.
That we
I
want
also
to
want to get the King James version one, but that's for myself, more personal stuff.
We want to get we already had New King James. We also want to get an NIV translation. We want to get a Calvinist Bible. Want to get a Catholic
the one that
Bible.
you sent in the...
Oh yes. There's also a Bible. Did you look at the Bible I sent in the Discord?
It looks cool.
The Sefer?
I did not.
Sefer?
Something
it is. It's as best we can translate from the original Hebrew as possible.
Oh, where it's just a direct...
Yeah,
Yes.
it's just direct translation.
They have verses. They keep the verses in chapters. But they replace, like, God is replaced with Elohim. Lord is replaced with Adonai, like the actual words they used.
Oh, that's cool.
Which becomes really cool when you're looking at Genesis because they have 3 different names for God. And, like, the Holy Spirit does something, God the Father does something, God the Son does something. It's really cool. But they also have all the apocryphal books in it too, as well, like the Book of Enoch, the Book of Maccabees, the Book of Jubilees, kind of like everything. They have everything in there, and like it specified that like, hey, these are apocryphal, but we wanted to put this in there because we want something that is like complete with as much as we know, and yeah. But anyway, we plan on getting that as well because I like the wordings of a lot of the stuff in there. But yeah, enough of that. We'll get right into it. Starting with Luke 22, verses 39 through 46. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went, as usual, to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not give in to any temptation." He walked away, about a stone's throw, and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." And an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last he stood up and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. Why are you sleeping, he asked them. Get up and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation. Okay, so starting right off with the agony of spirit. In a lot of the different translations, different gospels, they separate the agony of spirit from the actual sweating blood. And we had discussed this in our young adults group last Sunday over Passover. What do we think of when we think of the agony of spirit? And something that I had brought up was that the fact that he knows, God knows what he's doing. He's fully human, fully God. He knows what's going to happen. He knows that his death is going to be the salvation of thousands and thousands of people. But at the same time, he also knows that there's going to be even more people, if not more people, who accept it that are going to fully reject it, whether they see it happen and say, no, I don't, or even refuse the actual thing of it happening. So I think for me that's a lot of the agony of his spirit is him mourning the people.
Said that really confusingly.
Did I?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He means people will reject that Christ even died on the cross. That's what he's trying to say.
There's people who argue that in spite of the excessive amounts of historical text
and evidence.
When we have
I'm sorry.
there's others.
I was trying to think of how it was confusing.
The way that I've heard it phrased, people rejecting Christ, is there's stuff that had all this stuff been about the Caesar of Rome. Mm-hmm. They just, oh yeah, cool, they'd accept it even with one manuscript.
Yeah.
Whereas
I think it's the Gaelic Wars. There's 3 manuscripts.
Yeah, and the only in spite of the surmountable evidence, the insurmountable evidence for all of this, people still reject it because they're not that would require them to accept that there's a God and accept that they're going to be held to account for their actions.
Yeah, I think the agony of the spirit Christ is feeling here is that knowing those things, knowing that people are going to reject that he was alive and died.
Yeah, as well as probably also the knowledge of what's about to happen to him.
Well, yeah, but I like to think about that as well because it keeps it more.
So, I noticed that. So, in 40 he says, "Pray." He's said unto his disciples, "Pray that ye not enter into temptation." And then later he finds them asleep. And when he rose up from prayer, and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow, which I found I just noticed that the second read through.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been really stressed
exhausted
out
from grief? Yeah.
Something bad is about to happen, or you're stressed out, and you're just all I can do is sleep.
Yeah, that was about 5 weeks of my life for a little bit.
Yeah, I say 3, but
yeah,
yeah.
So I just drowned that wanting to sleep in copious amounts of fallout. So it's okay.
Yeah, and he says, "Why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation."
Mm-hmm.
You're sleeping to deal with the stress. It's no, you need to be awake and praying.
Pray about it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed that.
No, I like it. That's reading. Yeah, along with the prayer too is the way Christ is praying. Father, if you are willing, please take this cup from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. I think a lot of Christians have forgotten how to pray like that.
Yeah.
We deserve nothing from God. We do not deserve to ask God for anything.
The only thing we deserve is eternal damnation.
Yeah, and God has saved us from that through grace. But when we're praying, a lot of the times I feel like we're always praying for God to give us something. God, I want this. God, I want that, and not be like, God, I would like this. But let your will be done. Yes, ask God for things. I'm sure He was more than happy for us to ask Him for stuff. But we need to keep in mind that if God does not give it to us, it is His will. Whether that be it's not good for us or it's not our time. There's a great podcaster. His name's George Janko. He used to be on the Logan Paul podcast. Was actually through other things, but because of his faith, was fired from the show. and went and started his own podcast. And you can see like beginning of the show to how it's going now. There's a lot of you can see his growth as a Christian, and a lot of the stuff he talks about is how people pray, because he was at that time beforehand he was a very lukewarm Christian. It was only kicked off the show because of how serious he was getting about it. And one of the things he talks about is asking God for things, but not allowing God to do his will, or not wanting God to do his will, just wanting what we want and just ask, and never like ask God to, always demanding of God, but never asking of God, and never allowing the room for God to do his will.
Yeah. Well, and that's a big thing with the name it and claim it stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very, if you pray hard enough, I declare it. Like, okay, just because you declare something in the name of the Lord doesn't mean that it's going to happen if it's not in God's will.
Kenneth Copeland. Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
We calling you out.
Any prosperity preacher.
Benny Hinn.
Actually, a lot of, I watched a video recently a lot about like really good stuff that Benny Hinn has said before. Because like he was really good and just like slowly fell into prosperity preaching.
He taught that there's not a Trinity, there is a 9 people. Like, this was back. Mike Winger has a video on it.
Yeah, I was talking about his. I was watching a little bit of his stuff
where he was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, apparently according to Benny Hinn, within each part of the Trinity is an additional Trinity, so there's 9 of them.
Well,
it's got a little polytheistic, if you ask me.
A pantheistic.
And one God. That's all God commands.
What?
You guys don't get the.
Huh?
Never.
I hear what you said.
No, it's fine. We'll move on.
Yeah. Well, and the way that.
But yeah.
I really like the way that it's that part. The Father. I really like the way that it's phrased in the King James version. Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done.
Yeah.
I like that. Nevertheless.
Yeah.
Like.
That's good.
Like nothing less than God's will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like that. Also, like the way he's like the prayer he is even doing here brings so much humanity to Christ.
Like,
because like Christ is fully human, fully God, but like him begging not to go through the suffering, like it's so human.
Yeah.
But.
Because as we're going to get into, the way he died was horrible because the Romans were really, really good at killing people in a very painful way.
Yeah. We'll get into that. But moving on to the next section, we're going to talk a little bit about sweat and blood. So I'll let you do the
sweaty blood.
So I forget the Latin. Can you
Bloody
look up
sweat.
the Latin? It's hemidrosis?
Hemidrosis.
Okay. What it is it literally translates to sweating blood. And
literally it translates to blood sweat. But
yeah, blood sweat. Yeah.
Blood sweat.
So I've been like listening to and watching a bunch of stuff where it's like physicians who have worked with historians and archaeologists to break down the like Passion of the Christ and all the different stuff that happened, and it's actually a medical condition that has showed up multiple times again throughout recorded medical history, where most of the time it's usually due to like a health condition, but there are I think it's a little less. I think it's like 2/5 of the cases have been due to stress. One of them is a man on his way to execution.
Yeah.
Example here. Only that person was probably
deserving of
it.
Yeah.
One was a woman about to be essayed. I'll say essay for the internet. That way we don't get banned on YouTube. And then one of them was a man who was on a sinking ship who knew he was essentially going to drown or die horribly at sea. It's always due to extreme amounts of stress. What it does is it causes the capillaries around your sweat glands to burst. Mm-hmm. And then it bleeds into your sweat glands. So as you sweat from the stress, it bleeds. And depending on the mixture, it can be anywhere from pink to like crimson red. Mm-hmm. Because this is, what time does the timeline say that this is?
It's before 6 a.m.
Yeah.
That's
so
all
this
I
is
know.
Because still it's not day yet and it hasn't been in the warm days, so it's still in the cold of night.
Yeah.
That's why biblical scholars and physicians believe like he didn't bleed out from this. His pores probably closed up from the cold once he like was up and doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it also makes your skin hypersensitive.
Which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
But yeah, and another thing with like you said, with like getting super sensitive to where like a slap on the face feels like getting hit by a truck. Like without the amount of pain that someone would feel.
And also the later scourging. I can't imagine how much worse that
yeah.
would be with the
'Cause
sweating
it's-
blood. That I
It's
just
not
now thought of.
even like it's not just the face though, right? It's the entire body that
It's
does
your
this.
whole body that does.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Moving on. Before
Imagine getting freaking.
So, anything involving the skin, imagine all of those nerves are hypersensitive because they're
Yeah.
now.
I cannot think of like I feel like I remember this feeling of like not to the extent of that, but like the feeling on my skin of like how people describe what your skin feels like after sweating blood. Never mind, I can't think of what it feels
Sunburn?
like. Huh?
Like really intense sunburn.
I mean,
Like a really intense cold sunburn. Like you feel every air molecule.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you guys want anything on actually I was going to talk about the temptation. Yeah. So at the end of this part where Jesus is walking to his disciples and get up and pray so that you not give into temptation. For me, I think a lot how I read this is not like temptation of just like general sin, the temptation of what's going to go through their minds kind of when Christ does die. Because like this entire time he's been telling them, like especially this entire week, I think every day he's like, I'm going to die, guys. I'm going to die and I'm going to rise again. Be prepared.
he's going and
It's
saying
like-
this temple is
You're
gonna
not
be
gonna
destroyed.
die. You're just being dramatic.
Well,
we
and,
won't
and
let
even
you die.
even multiple times they've been like, no, we'll fight for you like multiple times on the way to Jerusalem. They're like, oh no, you won't die. You don't have to. Like he's like, no, I have to die.
Yeah. But like to give into the temptation of, in a sense, like forgetting Christ, like the time they've spent with him and focusing on like,
They're
he's
gonna
dead.
kill
They're
him.
gonna come for us. We got to run, and not giving into the temptation of just abandoning their faith they have now.
Well, even on Silent Saturday, they were all hiding.
Yeah.
They were all gathered in one house hiding. The door that even talks about the doors being locked.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why Jesus had to come through the wall.
Yeah. But yeah. So, you guys have anything else? We'll move on to the next section.
No, I'm ready to move on to the next section.
Okay. Yeah. So reading the next part, verses 47 to 53. But even as Jesus said this, a crowd approached, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus and to greet him with a kiss. But Jesus said, Judas, why would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? When the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, Lord, should we fight? We brought the swords. And one of them struck at the high priest's slave, slashing off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this, and he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests, the captains of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him. Am I some dangerous revolutionary, he asked, that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day, but this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns. So yeah, first off, Judas kissing Jesus. As we said a couple minutes ago, a slap on the face feels like getting hit by a truck. So Judas giving Jesus a kiss.
Or imagine getting smacked with severe sunburn.
That
And then probably multiply that by some magnitude.
they explain it as like this feeling would be like his skin getting set on fire because of the warmth of Judas's lips, which sounds weird, but because of the warmth
At the time, kissing someone on the cheek was normal.
Yeah, but like he's
Not
been
gay.
in this cold place for so long, and now Jesus is kissing him and bringing a little bit of warmth. Like that warmth feels like his skin is melting. Which
I'm not gonna say that.
I think a lot of I don't know. I just think there's a lot to say with like Judas being the one to hurt Jesus first in a way.
Mhm.
Like the
Very
capillaries
poetic.
broke and it's
God is so
That hurts.
poetic, bro. I love it so freaking much. But continue.
It's almost like he knew what he was doing when he set history in motion.
It's almost like the entire history of the world is just one big story. It gets me going.
and with Judas.
Not in a
See,
weird way.
you would have been fine if you stopped there. So I'm just gonna cut that part
I saw
out and just
Nathan's
play.
face. Okay.
But yeah, so like with Judas doing this, like being the one to like in a way inflict the first pain on Jesus, I think there's a lot. Yeah, I don't.
The cut off of the ear, I find interesting. I think this is entirely speculation, and just because it would be funny, would be if the ear was cut off, and instead of picking up the ear, because you see in movies and stuff, Jesus always picks up the ear. If he just walked up and gave the guy a new ear, and there was just some random guy's ear setting on the ground, like someone else walks through the garden later, and it's like, that's really disturbing.
Blood splatter, just an ear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something I had mentioned before too. Is like Peter probably wasn't going for the ear.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah.
Because that's a weird spot to try and cut.
Well, or if Peter was swinging for,
And the dude dodged.
Yeah. Well, it also says and he smote the servant of the high priest. So what if he was swinging for the high priest and the servant like went to go shove him out of the way and like just the way it happened?
Yeah.
Which
That's
it doesn't
possible
say
as well.
that. It's just that's
Speculation.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's also like good on Luke for not calling out Peter in this moment. Like the rest of them do. They're like, oh yeah, Peter did it, but like Luke's like,
well, and this is it could
not,
have.
he's not. He ain't snitching. Luke ain't no snitch.
Well, it's also a historical account, so he's probably
Yeah.
getting other eyewitnesses, and you don't have enough eyewitnesses that other than the other disciples specifically were like, oh yeah, I saw one of the disciples cut off the guy's ear.
Right.
Like, oh, and then Jesus healed his ear.
Should be really interesting, like the perspective of the guy that lost his ear.
Yeah.
I like.
What,
'cause
what was
the-
he thinking the whole time?
So you said you haven't seen Passion of the Christ, right?
No, I have not.
So in that scene, when that happens, Jesus he drops. I think he gets punched in the stomach and he falls to the ground, and he like crawls over to the dude because now all like the disciples are like fighting. They're like being restrained by the guards and stuff, and Jesus walks over to him and like picks up the ear. Actually, I don't remember if he picks up the ear or not.
I don't know.
But he walks over to him and the dude's like, like bleeding, and he just like puts his hand on his like ear and like puts his forehead against his and like just prays, and like slowly comes off, like takes it off, and the guy like freezes and like totally shocked and just like feels and touches and sees his ear, like feels his ear, and like just like 1,000-yard stare as he's like touching his ear and like freaking out. And like they chain him up and they drag him away eventually, and the dude's just still sitting there on the ground, just like completely utterly shocked, just like touching his new ear and stuff. It's very, I like how they do it. But yeah, like on the thing of Judas, I'll say it because I said it last time and I want to say it again. There's a book, 12 Ordinary Men, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like goes through like each of the disciples and like how do you relate to the disciple in this way and that way. And for me, like, people make fun of me when I say it, but I relate to Judas. Part of my like testimony is going to watch a play where it was in a sense the same thing that the book is about. It's each disciple, and at every moment, each disciple stops and like looks and talks to the audience and is like, "You're like me because of this, because of this, because of like." It's all it like focuses on like the bad things about them, and at the end, it's like, "But we are all saved because of Jesus," and like it's all fine
Except for Judas.
But though I don't remember any of the other ones except for Judas's, because Judas was so powerful for me. Because it was like, yeah, you hate me because I betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, but you betrayed Jesus for even less on a daily basis. And yeah, that like hit me a lot. And so when it comes to like reality of like deep down who I am when I relate to a disciple, it's Judas, because I like betray Jesus every single day of my life for even less than 30 pieces of silver.
Well, that's what everybody does. It's sin. You miss the mark.
Yeah. But
Yep.
I relate to that more than I can relate to like Thomas doubting or Peter's denials and stuff like that. So also significance with the 30 pieces of silver. If you look in Deuteronomy, 30 pieces is the amount of a slave. Like the worth of a slave.
If you kill a
was 30
slave on
pieces.
accident, you have to pay their master 30 pieces of silver.
Yeah. So like Judas betrays Jesus and like in a way brings Jesus down to being like a slave. Like Judas betrays Jesus like a slave.
already gave himself over as a servant.
Well, yeah, but like the kind of like the the hidden meaning.
He took a
behind that.
slave's price for
Yeah.
the Messiah.
Well,
Well, what's the significance there?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway,
Yeah, it's a different subject, but like one of the only mentions of someone being directly possessed by the devil himself is Judas after he realizes what he did.
yeah. Which, not saying I'm possessed by the devil, but I'm just saying I relate with Judas's betrayal to Jesus because we do that every day. But yeah, and then it kind of just goes on. There's not a lot really that happens here. I mean, the main thing is Judas kissing Jesus and then Peter cutting off the dude's ear, which I guess it's not in this version or in this gospel where he heals the ear back up. But it's at this point where he's like, where like Judas kind of goes off at Peter for Peter being like, "I'll protect you, Lord." Judas is like, "I don't need you to protect me."
Jesus, yeah. I thought you said Judas. Yeah.
I might have. I don't know. Okay.
I was
Either
like,
way.
Judas
why
does
would
not go off
Judas?
it.
But yeah, like
I was very confused.
and Peter like cuts off the dude's ear and it's like, "I'll protect you, Lord." And Jesus is like, "If I could right now, I could call down the host of heaven, the entirety of the Lord's army down here on earth, and I could wipe all of these people out in a split second. I don't need you to. I appreciate the effort. I don't need you to do this right now." I like that. I mean, Drew had a conversation about that one evening. That was good. But yeah, then Jesus heals the ear, which is like I said, the perspective of that soldier as that happens has got to be like, because even if like we were saying when we recorded last, like if the sword got stuck in his head, like the way swords were and like how everything was, if the sword got stuck in his head, like this dude walked over to him. The dude he's arresting for being a criminal walked over to him, ripped the sword out, put his hand on him, and he was completely healed and had a new ear.
Yeah, because if you're aiming, if it was like that, Peter was intentionally aiming for his head, like it could have gone in at an angle, took the ear off, but also stuck into his skull. Like, again, it's pure speculation, just different.
Yeah,
me having
thinking of it like as an actual historical event.
Well, thinking of it as it actually happened.
Like if someone were to actually
in
swing
that
a
present
sword
day,
at someone,
other than reading a story off a page.
Yeah.
So.
Like if you were to actually swing a sword at someone and hit them in the head near their ear, your ear is like you have your jawbone here, and then you have your skull. Like in order to cut that off, you'd either have to go straight up and shear, or come in at a side and catch underneath it and dig into the skull.
Yeah.
So like, or it just could have been a weird fluke thing where he had a really, really sharp sword and it managed to actually get his whole.
Yeah.
It could have even just been a good chunk of his ear too.
Yeah.
Like, again, just like I'm a huge war history nerd. Way that you swing a sword, like blade angle and stuff, drastically changes it. And again, this doesn't go into super duper detail. It just says the ear was cut off.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of stuff. It's just weird. The amount of damage there could heavily vary from one end of like, oh, it's just the ear gone, to like, oh, he had a sword stuck in his head temporarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like what you like. I like that you brought up the other passage, the other Gospels accounts of Jesus being like, "Yo, if I wanted to, I could."
Yeah.
Destroy all these people, because he could have said, "You know what? These people aren't worth it."
Yeah.
And he kind of would have been right. He is God after all. He could have
literally
even before then. He could have just after the flood been like, "You know what? They're gonna go down the same path. Might as well just end it now." But no, he loved us enough to actually stay here and go through with it. And yeah, it's very significant.
And also the darkness you pointed out earlier, how they came at the hour. Jesus pointed out they waited.
But this moment, this is your moment, the time when power of darkness reigns. Which I like that because like it talks about in different parts of the Bible and stuff like that too, about like how at nighttime is when darkness reigns and stuff like that. I think the main reason for that is just because like it's dark, everything's hidden. You can do things you can't do in the daylight.
Drew is dying. The pestilence.
I have to use the sound thing.
And so yeah, with him he's like I've been in the temple every day. I was there every day for I think he doesn't specify like this week or if he actually was at the temple every single day of his life. But
probably was
at least for this week, for Holy Week. And he's like, but this is your moment when you come, like when the hour of darkness reigns, and I like that.
Wow, guys, really?
All right, anything else before we move on?
No.
Okay.
What were
And
the
then-
next ones in the timeline for? Because
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of extra detail of like Peter and stuff in here, but we're focusing on the like Jesus part of this. Like
Yeah.
I know it's all Jesus related, but like at some point in the podcast, we're gonna go back over this
Yeah,
whole section
we
and
can-
read it as a whole.
Mhm.
Like
Right now, we're picking apart the history and the medicalness of it.
So the next one
Yee.
is
In fact, we'll go over
religious
this
leaders
part 4
condemning
times if we read all the
condemning
Gospels.
Jesus.
where they're beating him.
So going to skip over like Peter denying Jesus, mainly because that's not really part of the like
Actual physical.
the actual physical
and
stuff.
the actual part of the execution.
And so
And we're gonna go back over. We're gonna go over the Book of Luke when we get to it.
Yeah.
Like so, we'll go over all that. It'll also be in the other Gospels as we go over it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just this one, we're specifically wanting to focus on like the direct Jesus part of it. Like
The death. I don't know what this was.
because I feel like the
I have problems. Sorry, continue.
what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, and like the way that Jesus died leaves and all this accounting and the history and medical science of it, like rules out any like, oh, did he survive somehow?
No.
Like
I
that,
feel like you had to be built different.
I
I,
feel
mean,
like-
he was built different.
like it says he was just like your average guy. Like obviously he was
Yeah.
very physically fit. 'Cause the average, he was a carpenter that
Mhm.
walked everywhere.
Yeah.
But
But like, assuming he isn't God, if by these people's arguments,
then
if he had to have been built different to be able to survive a crucifixion,
he was like on roids, like the liver.
He was on divine
his
roids.
organs were on roids.
He was on divine roids.
Divine
Yeah.
roids.
God is just like you just get up and Jesus is like jacked.
He slammed like 3 boxes of protein powder beforehand.
That's why he's sweating blood. His body is like, I shouldn't have this much protein. What's happening?
Yeah, but
I actually like thought. Sorry, continue. I'll tell my joke.
the joking part is that it would be silly for him to have gone through all of this and been able to handle it as well as he did and be conscious and not in shock this whole time
Yeah.
without him being both fully man and fully God.
Yeah. Well, no, the joke I was gonna make is because I get on average about 14,000 steps at work a day. I was like, I just slam a box of protein powder before work and just get jacked while I'm working. Which not be good because this arm would get huge because like I use this arm to pick up all the chairs while I hold all the materials in the other hand. So like, yeah. But
I'm
anyway,
like constantly doing this motion driving a forklift.
forklift. Oh, the forklift drivers at.
Wax on, wax
I
on.
want to punch them. They're so freaking like they just run through like the like driveways, like the areas they can like drive through and almost hit everyone. I hate it. Also,
Yeah,
second
we're
shift.
supposed to. We literally have stop signs like stop and
Oh.
honk before.
We do. They don't. They just honk. It's like when I'm walking when I go to an intersection, I will look and turn and make sure there's no forklifts coming because they just barrel through there and then they complain when they drop pallets and break chairs. Like you guys are revving this thing like it's a freaking drag race. Anyway, we'll continue. So reading the next part with Jesus before the council.
He's being
66.
beaten this whole time as
Yeah.
well.
66 to 71. I like how Passion has it. Passion of the Christ has it because like they're beating him constantly like throughout. Like it kind of shows a little bit of them taking him. Like they're just messing around like punching him and stuff, and then like they're over a bridge and they punch him and he falls down over the bridge and he's got like this chain wrapped around his waist. And he like falls off the bridge and gets caught by the chain. He's just like hanging there. And there's like blood dripping from his face. And
You say 66? Should we start at 63?
63. Oh, I guess it is.
Oh, yeah, smote
Yeah.
him.
I was about to say, wait a minute. there's a whole-
That read to me like it was all previously, and Peter was just remembering Jesus saying he's going to deny him. This is also another thing they do in the Passion very well. It's because during this whole thing, Jesus is like looking at Peter directly in the eyes. And the lady's like, aren't you one of his disciples? He goes, no. And looks Jesus directly in the face and is like, I don't know him. And it's like, you feel it so hard because he's just sitting there and you can see like the sadness in his eyes. You can
Peter,
see this.
you lie. If your name is
But yeah,
Peter.
we'll start from 63.
Screw you, Peter. No, I'm joking.
We should probably cut that part out.
Probably.
Oh well.
And Peter left the courtyard, weeping bitterly. And the guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and said, "Prophesy to us, who hit you that time?" And they hurled all sorts of terrible insults at him. At daybreak, all the elders of the people assembled, including the leading priests and the teachers of the religious law. Jesus was led before the high council, and they said, "Tell us, are you the Messiah?" But he replied, "If I tell you, you won't believe me. And if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated in the place of power at God's right hand." They all shouted, "So are you claiming to be the Son of God?" And he replied, "You say that I am." Why do we need another witness?" They said. "We ourselves heard him say it." So yeah, starting off right away, I mean, like, they're beating him and mocking him.
And again, with his skin being hypersensitive from
He's feeling all of these on, like, dial turned to 100.
Yeah, because it's cold out, so your skin's already more sensitive when it's cold. And
Yeah.
the Middle East gets cold at night.
But not even that, like, the way that punching him, too, while he's cold is going to... That's a whole different kind of, like, extra pain that's happening on top of them actually punching him.
Yeah. Your
On top
nerves,
of his nerves being
you have two
dialed
different things that make your skin and nerves much more sensitive.
Yeah.
Like, I've mashed my knuckles through a pair of gloves in the cold. Ooh, that
up.
hurts.
Oh, there's nothing worse than mashing cold knuckles against metal. That's or
like
knuckles against cold metal. Like
or
cold mashing does not go well.
Cold
yeah.
mash.
Now imagine getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I noticed in 68.
Mm-hmm.
Yours, what does it say?
And if you ask me a question, you won't answer. Or if I ask you a question, you won't answer. In 68.
Is that it?
That's all it says.
Okay, so mine says, "And if I also ask you, ye will not answer me, nor let me go." So he's saying, like,
okay.
even if I try and defend myself, you're not going to let me go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Even if I say what you want me to say,
These Bible leaves words out.
like, they've already determined.
I'm just teasing you, sorry.
This is why Reformation Bibles are the best.
I'm
Anyway.
a Baptist preacher. Also, I realized
I am not a KJV only. I just like the way that it flows, and it's also a lot easier for me to memorize. So.
Yeah, same.
I also realized when I was reading 1 Timothy at the beginning of the episode, I sounded like a Southern preacher for a little bit.
Yeah. You said Jesus.
Jesus.
Anyway, so yeah,
That's why I was trying not to laugh the whole time. I was like, why is
I
he
saw your
talking
face.
like
I'm like,
that?
just keep talking. No, I like this interaction. It's like, if I tell you, you won't believe me. If I ask you a question, you're not going to answer me. He's like, there's nothing I say that's going to get me out of this, and I know that. And so all I'm going to say is that right now, the Son of Man will be seated in the place of power at God's right hand, which of course makes him angry because they know when he's saying that about himself.
Yeah.
He's like, are you the Son of God? You say that I am, which I don't actually know if this is true, but the way that mine words it, he's like, you say that I am, and then they respond, why do we need another witness? We ourselves have heard him say it. To me, it sounds like they're breaking a Mosaic law when they don't have a witness. Because I know a lot of the laws require you to have a certain amount of witnesses for certain things.
Probably.
Probably. I don't.
Okay.
I don't know enough about that. That would be a question for a pastor.
Man.
Oh,
Hey, if you guys know, let us know. Because that, to me, that's kind of how it reads off.
Just ask Jake and then, on camera and cut that in there.
What does your version say?
Wait,
71.
call Jake.
In 71 or 70?
71.
Mine says, "For we ourselves have heard from." Yeah, his is going to be the same as mine. It says, and they said, "What need we any further witnesses? For we ourselves have heard of his own mouth." So.
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like they're breaking a law, and this is their workaround, and
a kangaroo court.
I mean, that's what this is. It's a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
But yeah. So. There's not really a lot to unpack there. As far as
they're just looking
kind of
for a
what they said.
reason
Yeah.
to execute him because they know, deep down, they know that what he's saying is right.
yeah, it's just not what they want. They want someone
Because
to free them from Romans, not free them from the captivity
and
of their
also
sin.
they know what he's saying is true, and they know that because what he's saying is true, that takes away their power, their political and religious power.
Mm-hmm.
They're no longer top dog.
Yeah.
They don't want to give that up, and that's why like that's why the Pharisees, after they went underground and stuff, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's like a whole weird history thing with like what the Pharisees and Sadducees did after like the Romans like banned like this.
Ooh,
So,
I don't know why I'm yawning.
Yeah. Okay. If you guys got nothing else, we can move on to the next section.
I mean, just that they were beating him the whole time while this was
Yeah.
going on. They're like punching him, trying to get the answers that they want. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
like this was not only just a kangaroo court. This was also like a torture / interrogation section.
Yeah.
Like
kangaroo court while they're interrogating him through torture.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're like shining a lamp in his face and punching him in front.
Where
of
are the
judge.
drugs?
Yeah,
Martha.
not actually literally shining a lamp in his face, but if you think of the movies where they're doing a very rough interrogation where they're beating somebody, imagine that in front of the judge.
Yeah.
And the judge has already determined that you're guilty.
Yeah. But yeah. So yeah, if you guys got anything else, we can move on.
No, I'm good.
All right, and then starting from chapter 23, and I guess we'll just read on until the end of the 25, which is like that whole Pilate to Herod, back to Pilate, and then eventually being crucified. So I'll just read all of that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so beginning with 23. Then the entire council took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. They began to state their case. This man has been leading our people astray by telling them not to pay their taxes to the Roman government and claiming that he is the Messiah, a king. So Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Sorry, I don't know why why are you? Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, you have said it. Pilate turned to the leading priests in the crowd and said, I find nothing wrong with this man. Then they became insistent. But he is causing riots by his teachings wherever he goes, all over Judea, from Galilee to Jerusalem. Oh, is he a Galilean? Pilate asked. When they said that he was, Pilate sent him to Herod Antipas, because Galilee was under Herod's jurisdiction, and Herod happened to be in Jerusalem at the time. Herod was delighted at the opportunity to see Jesus, because he had heard about him and had been hoping for a long time to see him perform a miracle. He asked Jesus question after question, but Jesus refused to answer. Meanwhile, the leading priests and the teachers of the religious law stood there shouting their accusations. Then Herod and his soldiers began mocking and ridiculing Jesus. Finally, they put a royal robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate, who had been enemies before, became friends that day. Interesting.
Huh?
What is your version?
What?
12. What does your version say?
And the same day, Pilate and Herod were made friends together. For before they were at enmity between themselves.
Interesting.
Interesting. Well, I've never read that part before. I don't think. That's interesting.
That is funny. Okay. Then Pilate called together the leading priests and other religious leaders, along with the people. And he announced his verdict. You brought this man to me, accusing him of leading a revolt. I have examined him thoroughly on this point in your presence and find him innocent. Herod came to the same conclusion and sent him back to us. Nothing this man has done calls for the death penalty. So I will have him flogged, and then I will release him to you. Then the mighty roar arose from the crowd. With one voice they shouted, Kill him and release Barabbas to us. Barabbas was in prison for taking part in an insurrection in Jerusalem against the government, and for murder. Pilate argued with them, because they wanted to release Jesus. But they kept shouting, Crucify him, crucify him. For the third time he demanded, Why? What crime has he committed? I have found no reason to sentence him to death. So I will have him flogged, and I will release him. And the mob shouted louder and louder, demanding that Jesus be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate sentenced Jesus to die as they demanded. And as they requested, he released Barabbas, the man in prison for insurrection and murder. But he turned Jesus over to them and did as they wished. Okay, so
Interesting. Does yours have verse 17? For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast.
no, mine doesn't have verse 17 in it.
Does yours have 19?
It has a
'Cause I feel like
disclaimer,
that's
though.
kind of like important for context, but
So in
Sorry, I'm looking for the asterisk, so I'm trying to find it in here. But it's okay. Keep going.
So in verse 10, mine says, and the chief priest and scribe stood and vehemently accused him. So not just shouted, like, and then 11, and Herod with his men of war, so his set him at naught and mocked him and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him to Pilate. So like, they, as a mock, gave him probably an expensive, like actual king's robe.
Yeah. So real quick, mine for my reference note, my translation notes for 2316. Some manuscripts add verse 17. Now it is necessary for him to release one prisoner to them during the Passover celebration. So, and it says to compare with Matthew 27:15 and Mark 15:6 and John 18:39. So it just doesn't have it in Luke for some reason. So
Again, not King James version, but Reformation Bibles.
I don't know. I know that this one there's another verse that's left out because it says the exact same thing in a different, like, in the Gospels. One of them, they say they like the exact same thing and they left it out for some reason. I haven't looked into it too much, but
Check out What's in Your Bible on Instagram.
yeah.
He compares different Bible versions and stuff, but one of his big things is Reformation Bibles generally tend to be
more accurate.
Yeah.
But yeah, were you done with that, or do you have anything else?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Like they stuck like King James version says a gorgeous robe. Like it's not just like, oh, they threw some random cloth on him and made a robe out of it. Like they actually gave him a legitimate, well-made robe as a mock. They're like, oh, I want to make fun of you so bad, I'm willing to give up something expensive.
Yeah.
So just
But
right
even
now,
then, they were like, yo, I killed this man, though.
yeah. Just right now,
They're
what's
like,
happening?
yo,
This is
the Jews, chill.
just like for a thing. Like right now, this is happening. It's 7 a.m. So still early in the morning, but
Yeah.
that's all.
Well, and also the thing, but they cried saying, "Crucify him, crucify him." This was a normal thing. Like crucifying somebody was a normal thing. Like they knew what they were asking for.
Yeah.
It wasn't like execute him, because there were other forms of execution.
Yeah.
That are not as painful and not as shameful. They specifically asked for crucifixion. Like,
Yeah.
they knew they wanted it to be as painful as possible, and instead they chose to set free a murder.
Yeah.
Which, even like as people turn away from God, even in today's modern culture, you see people who have done nothing wrong. Like, it's tiny bit political, but there's a group of pro-lifers who got arrested and are facing 11 years in prison for praying outside of an abortion clinic. And then you have people who do horrible things to children that, millstone enthusiast, who get out in a few months. They get only a slap on the wrist and a few months in jail time.
Yeah.
Like, when wicked people
Well, I mean, like,
turn their backs on God and reject God, that's when you wind up with grave injustices like this.
But like that's kind of Jesus' point from the beginning, is that like, because you love me, the world will hate you.
Yeah.
But what's more important, the world hating you or the person who created it loving you? So like,
yeah. Like my point there was just like
A modern day example.
a modern day example of like, people know that it's wrong, but they still want it because they're the hardness of their hearts. They just want to reject God and everything that's good.
Yeah. We're jumping to Mark real quick because Luke doesn't have this section. Mark does. The soldiers mock Jesus.
Which chapter?
15. Mark 15.
Yeah. We're going off of, what's the website?
Learnreligions.com.
They have a timeline of this whole thing on their website, so we're using their timeline.
Yeah.
And this timeline matches up with other stuff that we've kind of done in our homework leading up to this episode. But if it seems like, oh, we're just reading it for the first time, we're reading it through, but we've also like been listening to podcasts, reading stuff, watching videos on this, like doing homework. Yeah. Most of it's podcast because we work, and it's easier to listen to a podcast with an expert on it.
But yeah. So, soldiers mock Jesus. Yeah. So for Mark 15, 16 through 20, the soldiers took Jesus into the courtyard of the governor's headquarters, called Praetorium. What?
What?
You made a face.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, just because I said praetorium.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a school word.
The soldiers took Jesus into the courtyard of the governor's headquarters, called the praetorium, and called out the entire regiment. They dressed him in a purple robe, and they wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. And they saluted him and taunted, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him on the head with a reed stick, spit on him, and dropped to their knees to mock worship. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him away to be crucified. So,
Where's this? Is the scourging in this one?
and the scourging might be in a different one, but that is one of the things I want to talk about was the crown of thorns, because
Not rose thorns.
they were not rose thorns. In fact, the thorns they would have used were about this long.
Oh, I forget what what's it called? It's like it's literally they renamed it. They renamed that, or like the modern name for that plant has the word Christ in it because it's become.
Yeah, I don't
So
have any
synonymous.
notes in mine. Let me see if any of them.
I just listened to a thing on it, and it's.
I'm sorry, I moved to tape.
But so like you're looking
I
at
apologize.
it's not like a rose thorn that's like really tiny. You're looking at 1.5 to 2 inch thorns,
It's like
and like
in his skull.
yeah, like historians, and biblical scholars, like they probably didn't like actually take and like weave a crown. What they probably did was cut off parts of the plant, just set them on his head, and then took like
Use
a map,
it says they use the
reed.
reeds. They struck when they have the reed stick. So they probably use that to drive in the skull, like in the skulls, drive the thorns into his skull, and like
You'd be
they're not like little brittle nail like thorns that are gonna break off as they hit hard bone. They're going to drive into his skull. So
like you have like a soft outer layer on your skull that they probably poked into.
which we'll talk a little bit about when we get to the shroud of when I get to the shroud of Turin. When I kind of just like briefly go over everything is the holes of the
Yeah,
The
and,
whole-
and then you
the holes of the
also
thorns are there.
like your scalp bleeds a ton. Like there's a bunch of blood vessels up there. So this is the thing to remember.
Not to mention, he still got sensitive nerves.
yeah,
Yeah.
like well, here's the thing too. You have him bleeding sweat in the garden. You now have him being beaten and scourged and has the crown of thorns going on. Like when it says his blood was spilled, I mean his blood was spilled, not just like
Lots of blood.
Yeah.
like
Lots and lots.
the way that we use the term his blood was like someone's blood was spilled, like bloodshed can mean like shooting somebody and it's just like a singular hole, whatever. Like this is like bleeding profusely from every inch of his body. It's not.
Not pretty.
So I actually looking, and I couldn't find where they actually like flog him and scourge him in
Google
the
question.
Gospels. So I'll Google it real quick.
Should we pause?
We'll be back.
You always learn about the Abraham thing first
That's true.
in
you
Sunday
do.
school.
Yeah.
That is fair.
Yeah. Okay.
We just had a funny moment.
It was quite funny. Nathan
I had a
forgot.
complete and total brain fart because of the order at which I was taught Bible stories in Sunday school. And
Yeah, basically he said Abraham couldn't have outlived Noah because the flood, and forgot that Abraham was after the flood.
yeah, because I was taught the
And unfortunately, I
Abraham
wasn't
story
recording.
first.
Yeah, it's okay.
Then Noah, and I'm like, oh wait, hold on, I'm doing something wrong here.
Yeah, so
This is why I should not have caffeine before recording because caffeine makes me
caffeine
tired.
while we're recording.
That too.
Anyway,
I need
Caffeine
more
makes me
caffeine.
tired,
I haven't
so-
had enough caffeine.
so
today.
to kind of, I don't know how much I'm leaving in, so I'll just say this whole right now. But yeah, so we couldn't find. There's no like actual like multiple verses where it talks about Jesus getting flogged. The only one we have is in Matthew 27 and verse 26. So Pilate released Barabbas to them. Then he ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip and turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. So,
We also do
Roman-
have historical accounts of Roman scourging too.
yeah,
So
Roman whips. To start off, a lot of people think it was a cat of nine tails, which isn't like entirely incorrect.
it's
It's the same premise, but instead of like what is at the end of a cat of nine tails?
I'm pretty sure the cat of nine tails is just leather.
Is it just leather?
Yeah.
These had
Leather.
lead and bone at the end of them.
Animal teeth.
And animal teeth.
They
and
also
like,
had broken pieces of porcelain and stuff like that in it.
not fun. And we'll talk a little bit
Specific-
more about that when we get to the shroud because it has a lot more stuff
And
about it.
some of them,
Yeah, like-
some of them were hooks. So, well, I guess since
Ripped.
we're going in order, we might as well talk about it now.
Mm-hmm.
So, what it was is they had the lead shot on the end. Sometimes they were hook shaped. I think that was probably later towards the end of when they were doing it. But they were made the lead shot on the end of the tendrils of these was so that way when you whipped your first few, like I was listening to a doctor talking about it. He's like the first few you would rip the skin open. And so like when you talk about accounts of the crucifixion and stuff, they just ripped his skin open. Well, once you get through the skin, that lead shot is meant to embed itself into the muscle of your back along with those teeth and catch on it and pull it out through the skin.
Yeah, they have that in Passion. They whip him and they get him on the side and it like stops and like the soldier pulls and he like laughs maniacally and just like I think both of them actually grab the whip and rip it out of him and it just rips a chunk of his side out.
And it's not just like your
brutal.
normal like meat part of the muscle, it's getting like the connective tissue between your bones and the rest of your muscle. And it's pulling that out through.
It's probably even like pulling tendons too.
Yeah,
And that freaking hurts.
Your tendons are the parts that connect your muscles to the bone.
I'm gonna cut that part out.
Yeah.
No, leave it in.
Leave it in. No, like it's pulling all of your muscles, tendons, and stuff, like ripping it out through skin. And like a lot of times you just think back. When it's talking about back, historical accounts of scourging, it's all the way from like your shoulders down, all the way down to your feet. So he probably had like chunks of muscles sticking out of the back of his legs. And again, the thing to remember here is after the sweating blood, your skin is hypersensitive.
Yeah, this shirt's like this is. You can't imagine how much this actually hurts.
Yeah.
Like, getting.
I mean,
that
at least
sucks.
after that, he had chunks where he didn't have skin anymore. So
That's true. I think at this point the adrenaline kicks in and he's like not feeling anything.
Well, the thing
I doubt
the
that.
problem is
he probably felt something.
I know.
the thing is
Yeah.
with the way that the Bible describes it, most people would have gone like medically. Most people would have gone into shock by now.
Yeah.
So they'd just be kind of there, wandering aimlessly. Adrenaline's kicked in. Jesus is completely conscious throughout this whole thing. He feels everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's aware. Like at no point does the Bible mention Jesus like fainting or anything. Like he's conscious. He does not go into shock. Like he felt all of this suffering, like for us, in spite of how awful we are. So.
Yeah. I highly recommend to watch Passion of the Christ. They actually, as we're going through this, they depict everything very well and very accurate to like Roman historically and like how what the Bible says with like each gospel coming together and stuff. So it's very. Yeah.
As one of the other guys from the youth ministry that my wife and I work with, he's like, the Romans were really good at killing people.
Yeah. No,
It
they
was
were.
like, they were
great
really
at
good
it.
So kind of to jump back to Barabbas real quick. The significance of it being Barabbas being released is Barabbas is what they wanted their Messiah to be. Barabbas was a revolutionary. Like Barabbas was in prison for taking part in an insurrection in Jerusalem against the government. Like he was known to be a revolutionary and was approving of the Roman Empire and Roman occupation. So like Barabbas is what they wanted their Messiah to be, and there's just so much significance in like Jesus like taking the place of who they thought God was and dying, and like even like as representing Barabbas as like the human collective of all of our sin.
Yeah.
Being like, no, take that. He doesn't need to suffer. I'll go suffer instead. Yeah. And it's very like, it's a very good picture to paint with that.
Well, and even Jesus says like if you're unjustly angry and hate someone in your heart, then you've murdered them in your heart. Like I've done that before in my life.
Yeah.
I am guilty of this.
I don't have enough fingers to count.
We're all guilty. Like I'm sure
toes.
even you, like the listener or viewer, you can think of times that you felt that way. Like we're all guilty of the same murder that Barabbas did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like the significance of like we are Barabbas. We are the sinner that he is taking the place of. And even like with Barabbas,
I like that. We are Barabbas.
yeah.
We're also the man who shouted from the crowd to crucify him.
Yeah.
Because it's our
We
sins
probably,
that demand
if we were
that
there, we
blood.
probably would have shouted the same thing.
But yeah, I like the picture of like Barabbas being. Don't worry, we'll let you rant when we get there. Or we'll let you not rant but ramble. With Barabbas being like.
He's about to drop some deep theological stuff on us.
Not necessarily, just a personal experience I've had.
Yeah. Like with Barabbas being like the one that they wanted for their Messiah, and kind of like to think about a little bit more of Jesus like, no, I'm your Messiah, and like, yeah, you believe he's what you Messiah that you want, but I'm the. I'm sorry, I said a really bad joke in my head. It's not the Messiah that Gotham wanted, but this is the Messiah that Gotham deserved.
They needed.
They're the one that they needed.
I'm not the Messiah Gotham deserves, but
I'm the Messiah that Gotham needs. Christ is Batman. Confirmed. I'm sorry.
Anyway.
I am
Where
a
were you?
horrible sinner. Anyway, yeah.
That's why the title of the podcast is Chief Among Them, guys.
But yeah, with Barabbas being like the one that they are, the Messiah that they're looking for, and like the actual Messiah is right in their faces the entire time. And like for me, I think deep down they know that this is the Messiah. They know, like, because the prophecies say it is. Like, as much as the Pharisees are so well knowledge of their like the teachings of like the prophecies, that they can see Jesus and see him and know like, okay, this is the Messiah, but it's not what they wanted, so they're not accepting of it. And I think that even says a lot for a lot of Christians today.
Yeah.
Jesus isn't what they thought, or isn't what they want him to be, so they don't accept him as.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Like a lot of Christians nowadays, like they're like, oh, well, we just want the nice Jesus. It's like, well, no, Jesus commands you to do things.
Yeah, Jesus would have loved you, welcomed you into your home, but guess what you also would have done? You know, condemned you for your sins.
Jesus, Jesus said, your sins are forgiven. He also said, go and sin no more.
Yeah.
Like we need to be striving to be more Christ-like. When part of that is submitting unto God. And, like our desires, so that way.
Yeah, about the thing you said about being in the crowd that shouted crucify him, like that could easily be us. I never had thought about that until about how long has it been now? I'd say like 2 years ago. 2 years? Yeah, 2 years ago. I was at a school, Academy of Arts, and I was doing a play called The Fourth Wise Man, which is like a fictional, biblical based play.
Historical fiction.
Yeah, historical fiction, basically. But yeah, there's a part where you don't see Jesus, but you see the crowd shouting crucify him as he's carrying the cross up to Golgotha. And just being in that crowd and shouting those like horrible profanities at Christ is like, or at least a representation of him. It's like, I don't know, it unlocks something in my brain. It's like, how different do I think I would actually have reacted if I were there?
Yeah.
Like, if I were a Jew in this time, would I really have stood up for him like I think I would? And yeah, and as I was shouting, I was just thinking about all that, and then like, that's why I love acting, because it lets you get into a headspace you don't normally get in, and then you can like think about how these people had thought, because they saw him as like a horrible blasphemer who's like, at least the common people did, because that's what their Pharisees had told them they were. So they were all shouting at this horrible blasphemer in their mind, but really they're killing their own Messiah.
Well, have you listened to the song "You Love Me Anyway" by Sidewalk Prophets? You'd actually like it. It's actually a creative.
I believe I have, yeah.
Probably.
Like, he's like, I am Judas's kiss, but you love me anyway. I'm, like, I'm skipping over some parts, but it's, I am the man who yelled out from the crowd for your blood to be spilled on this earth-shaking ground. Like, I'm the thorn. Like, I'm the thorn in your crown. Like, there's a lot of, like, truth to that. Of a lot of people on the internet are stupid and get in arguments like, oh, well, the Jews killed Jesus. Like, no. Or the Romans killed Jesus. Like, no, I killed Jesus.
We did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did it with my sin. He did it with his sin. He did it with his sin. You did it with your sin.
Yeah, it's good. Anything else?
No,
Nope.
that was my story,
That's good.
my ramble.
Yeah.
I kept
Okay,
it
how much do you
short.
want to bet that at least one of us is going to crack and start tearing up?
I'm already starting to tear up. I mean,
That's the reason I brought it up. I'm thinking about being the guy in the
I
crowd.
want my tear. Yeah. Okay.
And it's okay to tear up about this because this is realizing
I'll
the
say-
cost that your Savior paid and
I
love for
don't
you.
I don't tear up about many things, but the crucifixion is one that anytime I see any like representation or like
Man will weep.
anytime I see any like depiction of it, I'm like
Yeah.
I become weepy. Anyway,
Okay. So we are actually running out of recording time. I have to get to work. Nathan has to get home, get to work.
Well, I
Or
have to
get home to sleep, to
bed
get to work.
to work.
I work third shift, so we're actually going to split this up into 2 parts, which we weren't expecting to do, but I think it will actually work a lot better for us because there's a lot in the crucifixion we want to talk about, a lot when it comes to the resurrection, the burial we want to talk about.
yeah,
So
Stabby in the side with plasma.
yeah, that too,
stabby.
which the crucifixion. So we're gonna go ahead and cut the video here. So thank you all for watching, and we'll cut the video here, and then we'll have part 2 next week. So yeah, thank you all for watching. We've been Chief Among Them, and we.